we still need the stories, whether we read modern novels or not. It's like, we need that connection, whether it's with our elders or with our kids. We pass these stories on as something precious. For me personally, it's probably just the unknown. I've always been drawn more to the unknown and whatever the beyond of normal life. So I would actually go out and look for these. We would go to haunted houses. We would go to haunted areas of the cities, see what was going on. Yeah. Now, whatever that comes from, I don't know, but it kept life interesting.
It was almost like an escape.
Definitely an escape. Family life was not a happy life, so that was an escape. Oh, definitely.
Hey, welcome to the Floaties for Krakens podcast. I am your host, Camille Maria Costa, and it is a brilliant day to be monstrous. Hi everyone, welcome back to season 2, episode 9 of Floaties for Krakens. Hi, happy April. We are here. We made it. I think in this episode specifically, I just want to send a giant hug to anybody who needs it, and also a giant reminder to hug yourself, because that's also incredibly important. I also wanted to start off this episode with a trigger warning as well. This episode in specifics deals with a lot of difficult conversations and, complex layered discussion of sexual assault and sexual abuse. So, it's throughout the episode. It is the episode, so I just wanted to let everybody know that. I know that it can be triggering for some of our viewers, and so just protect yourself and listen if you wish to listen, and if not, that is completely okay. And I also wanted to draw attention to Sexual Assault Awareness Month as well, in the month of April. I'm including a bunch of resources down below in the description. If you want to take the time to look at them, read them, if you need them, they're there for you. And I just want to remind everybody that you are monstrously loved and monstrously important and monstrously believed, in every sense of the word. So, yeah. But this specific episode also has incredible amounts of beauty and strength and joy, and mostly because it involves one of my best friends in the whole world, Kathy Fuentes. In Kathy's own words, okay, Kathy is a dog mom, amateur mythologist, although I think she's an expert, and loving the señora life, as she always was destined to do. I had the pleasure of first meeting Kathy, 14 to 15 years ago, I think. We're showing our age. We were both about 14 or 15 years old. And we shared everything. We shared dance classes, theater classes, choir classes, classes. And I just love that girl with every inch of my being. Love her to Reese's Pieces. She's everything to me. And she has been by my side through everything. And I hope she knows that I would do the same. And I hope to do the same for the rest of our lives. She's not only brilliant, but just a phenomenal human that is so freaking creative and so passionate about what she cares about the most and just is a magnificent storyteller, and I love her so much. And I hope she knows that. And I just genuinely think you all are going to enjoy this conversation today. And I learned so much, as I always do, talking to the brilliant Kathy, and I think you'll do the same. So, yeah, thank you all again for tuning in. Take this episode with warmth and love and grace and patience. And yeah, ladies and cuttlefish, let me introduce to you Kind Eyes for Medusas. Well, hi, Kathy.
Hello, Camille.
How are you? How are you?
Good, good. We've got special guests.
Yay!
My
Okay,
puppies.
because I know everybody's gonna want to know what not only an incredible dog mom you are, but
Mhm.
the incredible names that you named your
Oh,
children.
okay. Yes.
Please.
So this is Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan, hi Obi.
He's like, put me
Oh,
down. The other one's back here, Anakin.
hi
My dopey,
Anakin.
my little dopey one. Mushu, and then Jack Jack, who are fighting.
The ones yelling at each other right now.
Yeah, the ones who are not cooperating.
Love
with each
it,
other.
love it. It's so good to see you.
I know, long time no see.
I know. It's been okay. Well, for
It's been
people,
months.
yeah, and that's the worst thing about having a long distance best friend is that you can talk only like a select few
Olivia.
times,
Yeah.
especially adulthood and life. Yes, exactly. I agree.
Yes. It's rough. It's rough.
It's very rough. But yeah, Kathy, oh my gosh, Kathy and
Okay.
I go way, way back.
Oh.
When we were both mere 14-year-olds.
Oh my god.
I know.
Decades ago.
Literally.
A
Yeah.
whole decade ago.
Yeah. And I remember, so obviously this was in high school, and I hope I remember this right. Okay. So I know my mom, for those of you that may not know, is a dance teacher, has been
Mm-hmm.
all of her life, and was a dance teacher at the high school that Kathy and I went to school at. And Kathy, I didn't know her going into freshman year. I didn't know a lot of people going into freshman year.
Yeah.
Because I came from a different, not feeder, like middle
Not
school.
you came from like a random across town middle school.
Way over there. Yeah.
I know.
And I remember that Kathy took my mom's dance class, and I wasn't in dance the first year. But my mom would always tell me, there's this girl. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, she's in my class. Not only is she a great student, but she doesn't know how talented she is. Like, she can backbend, she can spin, she can fouette pirouette, she can.
Oh, thank you, Jack Jack.
Yeah, see, Jack agrees. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember I would see you. Like, I don't think we had.
No, we didn't have any classes freshman year. It wasn't until like sophomore year. Officially. No, you know what? It was the end of freshman year. And what had happened was we were exempt from like our exams or whatever. So us with a bunch of like hoodlum children were making our way to the mall. And you were friends with Tom, and I was like, well, I have nowhere to go. Tom's in this class. I'll just follow him.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. And then we literally had a whole conversation about your love life because he was giving you like random metaphors.
Oh boy. Oh my god.
And that was just the beginning of a very wonderful friendship.
Of a beautiful, beautiful friendship. Because let's be honest, right? Like, I think high school is very hard. For a lot of reasons. It's difficult, and you're learning how to navigate yourself in this world, and there are sticky situations you land yourself in, mean people you learn about, and
it's like life but on a small scale.
Yeah, and you don't know what you're doing half the time.
It's the pretest.
Yeah. And I always remember, you're right. I remember this mall walk and conversation because Kathy's always been just such a great listener, such a good listener. Like you could literally tell her like where the bodies are buried. Kathy will be like, gotcha, no problem.
Of course.
Take care of it.
That's not a great position. You're going to want to check on them in 3 to 6 months.
Right.
It rains there.
See? All the right questions.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so then we, hit it off, and we were in dance together, we were in theater together, we were in choir together.
That's right.
Yeah, we did literally everything together.
That's crazy.
I know.
Feels like forever ago.
I know. Hi, babies. Yes.
What? I don't understand what his problem is.
They're just feeling a lot of emotions. It's totally cool.
I know. They're going through it. Aw.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Well, for people that may not know all the things that you do now as adulthood Kathy, who are you, Kathy?
Well, I'm an avid dog mom,
Obviously.
history lover, a fan of good storytelling, and a pretty good crocheter, honestly.
Hell yeah.
Picked it up, learned it. Now I'm
That's
getting a lot better at it now. So
you're very talented. You're very creative. Like you're insanely creative. So it makes sense.
It's that ADHD, man.
We love it. We love it.
Takes you on a bunch of different rides.
See, and I think adulthood is about not only learning, oh, this is what I have, but finding cute things to preoccupy your brain.
Yeah, you gotta have hobbies.
You gotta have hobbies.
Life can't be all work.
No,
you gotta have some hobbies in there.
No, it definitely can't. Absolutely not. Yeah, and yeah, like I wish I could like put in a clip here of Kathy performing.
Oh God.
Because Kathy's beautiful, like just brilliant, amazing, just so good. And like the cool thing about Kathy too is like, there's artists that like do art and it's great, but then there's artists that have musicality, right? Like that, I don't know, it's like a different eighth sense that certain people have when it comes to like choreographing and like actually putting on a show. And I feel like Kathy does that so well, so freaking well.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, you're amazing. I love you so much. Like I would take every bullet for you ever for the rest of my life.
Aw. We'll take them together, Camille. It's okay.
Yeah, I know. We have before. So it's fine. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you love storytelling. Where, and I'm curious, like where did that come from? And I don't know if that transferred into like your love of creating and stuff like that.
Honestly, it's probably, I'm not gonna lie, it's probably my grandmother. Because she loved like these old school classic films, Gone with the Wind. She showed, and again, a little, 4-year-old has no business watching West Side Story.
Probably not.
No business. But that's what she would put on. Holiday Inn, Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire. Yeah. So she really started showing me like this whole world of like musical theater, and from there it just kind of kept growing to movies, theater, plays, TV. So she pretty much started it, and she gave me the avenue of like where my love for the arts came from. Yeah. She started it, and rest in peace. We miss her.
Yes, a lovely woman.
But it's something to carry with me into adulthood, to pass on to my children. Non-furry children.
Yes. Both alike.
Both in the same. But she's the one who really started it, and then I've had just really great teachers along the way, like your mom, who have like helped me develop those talents and helped me to recognize what storytelling is and how I can get my story across
Yeah.
without ever having to say a word.
That's beautifully said because
Mhm.
you are quiet to people that may not know you.
Oh yeah. I was like it takes a minute for me to come around and be like, "Hi guys."
Hello.
I
I know.
know. Like it does. It takes me a minute to open up to people. And so dance was a way to kind of put a big snippet of me without me having to do too much.
Yeah. You could
So,
just have fun and let
yeah.
go and
Mhm.
do your thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think
Provides
that's
an escape.
beautiful. Yeah, yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Yes.
100%. And I
Yeah.
feel like your grandma knew that too. I feel
Mhm.
like she could feel that sense of escape and sharing that with her grandbabies. Okay, so I'm curious, Kathy.
Mhm.
I know you said you were very enamored because of your grandmother's introduction of like old movies and old musicals, like the Golden Age and like Gene Kelly and Fred
Oh
Astaire.
yeah.
What about that did you like? I know you said that there was something about escaping and just creating like this
Mhm.
other reality. What made you choose dance as something that like you would escape in?
Well, dance was one of those, like I would watch like these really elegant, women, and it would, transform, and you kind of need for like movie musicals like suspension of disbelief, right? Like
Mm.
people don't always break into song and dance as much as we'd want them to
Right, exactly.
in regular life. So it was one of those, like I just kind of, when I got to high school, I was kind of like, well, I've always liked dance.
Yeah.
My mom took it. Maybe I could do something with it. And when I joined, I had no, I don't know, like foresight on what it would become.
Yeah.
It was just one of those that I was like, you know what? Let's try it. I've always liked dancing at quinces and stuff like that. Maybe this is just more of that.
Yeah.
To which your mom promptly said, no, it's not, but you're going to like it anyway.
Right. You could
Immediately went into ballet. And I was like, oh, well, there's
yeah.
this. So,
I would have never guessed that your freshman year was your first time doing ballet.
oh, yeah. Like,
Girl.
I had not really had experience dancing in that way. It was literally your mom was my introduction to like ballet, contemporary,
Yeah.
modern jazz, and
Yeah.
I basically just like grabbed it by the horns and was like, here we go, I guess.
Yeah.
This is my newfound love.
Yeah, yeah. That's wild. That's so
Hmm.
cool. Oh my gosh. And yeah, I think people would be stunned. Because I'm stunned. I thought you had been doing it for a while, to be honest.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I was like that. I wish, but
Yeah.
no.
Sure, sure. No, that's fair. Yeah. And
Hmm.
okay, so in that same realm, I remember when, every single year, and in our dance group was called Amakai Korie, which means Friends of the Dance.
Hmm.
And every year in different scenarios, but mostly for the end of the year concert, every single person had the option to choreograph a dance for the
Oh yeah.
show.
Hmm.
And I'm interested. So it's branching into this question of what is your relationship with the world of the spooky? Because in a lot of your dances, right, what I noticed is
Hmm.
there was these like really awesome, like, to be honest, we all felt so sexy in any of Kathy's. She made us feel so powerful and strong and like
Hmm.
so in control. But there was also these undertones of like emotion, like almost sadness to like some
Yeah,
areas of you
it's
know what I mean?
yeah. For I don't know why they always came across like that. Maybe it's just personality. Maybe just going through something.
Fair.
But spooky has always been like a consistent in my life, right? So when you're a little kid, you kind of grow up with these cartoons about like witches and da da da.
Yeah.
And for me, they never seemed like bad guys. These female, villains. And I was like, they don't seem bad. They just seem, Like, they're in their element. They're really powerful. I mean, they may be playing for the wrong side,
Oh, sure.
but when you're growing up, you don't have a lot of um like figures that look like you, right? So like my whole life I've been like morenita, right? And so in a lot of TV shows, a lot of cartoons and stuff like that, the only girls who had, especially growing up in like early 2000s, the only girls who had brown hair, dark brown hair, were like villains all the time. And so when I'm trying to find myself in those cartoons, I basically just default to like, well, we have the same hair color. She's
Yeah.
playing the bad guy though, but she still in her own right is also powerful. So I guess when I grew up, I kept that idea of, femininity as being like powerful, maybe a little on the dark side, um, but with like strength behind it. And so when I was choreographing, it was always wanting to be like using your femininity and like making you feel secure in your body. And if that makes you feel sexy and that you're having a great time,
It did.
but if it makes you feel good in your own body that way and your own like sexuality that way, I mean, you can only be so sexy at like 16.
True. Very
I was like,
true.
you can only go so far at 16, but if that's, so that it's not a scary thing
Yeah.
for you growing up, so you have more control of it and stuff like that. For me, it's what I always tried when I was choreographing to like, I want us to feel powerful, in a sexy way,
Hmm.
but to have the power behind that.
Yeah. That's such a brilliant way of putting it. So, number one, you're
Hmm.
absolutely right. And I am just making this connection right now that growing
Yeah.
up, a lot of the girls that had brunette hair that we were like, oh yeah, like that's me, were the bad guys, which is
Yeah.
really answering a lot of questions for me right now.
You're just like,
Oh, like
oh, well, yeah, you're right.
you are right. And but they were so, they had the best character. Like
Mm-hmm.
they were cool and they were different and they would do the things I think that we wish we had the strength to do, especially
Yeah.
at that age. Like I want to be able to be powerful and not care what anybody thinks and be in
Men were their
control.
like henchmen.
Oh yeah.
They're going up
Yeah.
against like this big, the hero or whatever, and she's like, I'm not gonna bow down to you just because you're a dude.
Right.
Like, if we're gonna have it out here, we're gonna have it out
And win.
and win, or be defeated because they're the villain. But
Sure. Sure.
it's, it's just it's powerful in its own way. To have that security and that self. Like, I'm bad guy, and I'm gonna plow through all of you, and that's the confidence that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Villains get to be bad bitches like that.
Oh, all the time. All the
Exactly.
time. And it's so inspiring and I just, I want that confidence. Like I want to be able to do that
Yeah.
now.
I
Right?
know.
Like
Whole
not
grown up, and you're like, man, I still wish I could do that.
yes, like oh my gosh, like that and it's hard. It's really hard. And you bring up a really good point that I want to touch on a little later because I know we're going to
Okay.
expand on this idea of sexuality and what it
Mm,
means
yeah.
to be sexy. So hold on to that thought because I have a
Okay.
question for you later about that.
Okay.
But speaking of these powerful women,
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, what do you think is a monster?
Mm, I think a monster is a person who, because I mean, when you're talking about like fantasy monsters and stuff like that, they're obviously not real, but there are some real monsters in the real world, and it's basically taking someone's, their power, their sense of agency and stuff like that. So, movie villains and monsters for me are never like truly evil, but I have seen and been on the receiving end of like actual just like evil here in the real world. So for me, monsters aren't so much like what goes bump in the night as much as what is, disrespecting you to your face in the broad of
In the
daylight,
day.
you
Yeah.
know? And that for me, that's what monsters for me are. I know everybody's kind of got like their own interpretation.
Sure.
But for me, that's who monsters are. They don't go bump in the night. They're up with the dawn, out there looking like me and you,
Yeah.
pretending that they're not ugly inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, you are so right. And there's an almost more terrifying feeling to know, oh, you know exactly who you are and what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. And
Yeah.
you're faking this exterior of like, I'm fine, I'm a good person, I'm not gonna hurt
Yeah.
anyone, with the full intention and capacity to hurt people.
Just, yeah.
And I think you make a great point, when you grow up with stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
And Kathy and I, we've had a lot of very deep conversations, and we've learned, I think, a lot about ourselves, mentally, and we're realizing, I think, a lot of things as we grow older now, because we
Oh,
have,
yeah.
I don't know if it's like the language, or we're reteaching our brains and our bodies how to kind of be people.
Oh, yeah.
That's a long story. That'll be for
Oh, yeah.
another podcast, maybe. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if we get into it, we get into it.
Season 3.
But I know, yeah. Um, and it breaks my heart that like you had to deal with monsters in the real
Yeah.
world. It's not fair. It's fucking disgusting and stupid. And I think it is I don't know. Like, the cool thing about this show is that I think, is that there's different ways to define monstrosity, and there's a lot of safety, like we just said, in
Yeah.
finding characters, that are deemed monstrous, but we find safety in them because they're badass and
Yeah.
they're cool, and they defeat the good guys sometimes, and
Yeah.
they're strong.
Mm-hmm.
But on the adverse of that, um, certain monsters for certain people aren't necessarily celebrated. Um, they aren't seen as very positive forces,
Yeah.
but they have power and control over you in a way that you don't realize until it's either brought before you in a very unexpected way, or you go through life and figure it out 10 years later. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I like your definition, and I'm curious
Thank
to
you.
go into this idea. um
Mm-hmm.
let's see. I want to go right into it. Okay, so
Okay.
speaking about monsters,
Yes.
please, Kathy, who is the immaculate Medusa?
She is my favorite monster in probably like Greek mythology. And for her, she's super fascinating to me because her story has grown and changed depending on who tells it, and she's one of the most used, like in Greek mythology. If you're doing Hercules, Medusa will show up. If you're doing, whatever, she'll show up.
Yeah.
And the old myth is that she was, one of, I guess, Athena's worshippers. And, she was very devout, virgin, the whole thing. And when they tell the story, they say she fell in love with Poseidon, and that upset Athena, and so she cursed her with the snakes, the hair of snakes, and turning men to stone.
Right.
In more modern retellings, and I think it's a really interesting take. I didn't think about it, but the more that I think about her story, the more it sounds like something from modern day, right? You're hanging out, you're minding your business, and all of a sudden, whatever guy comes into your life, be it good, be it bad, and they, take advantage of your kindness, and they take advantage of, who you are. Because obviously Poseidon didn't stick around when Medusa got her snakes,
Of course not.
And so modern tellings are kind of putting Medusa as like a victim, whether she, was assaulted or it was consensual, and that Athena punishing her was either like a gift or an actual punishment. I think it speaks volumes to where we are as like a society, because literally just with and especially with like young, young girls when you're in, your teenage years, your 20s, literally anything will make you a slut, right? And a lot of, media is telling us like, oh, well, she sleeps around, so she's a slut, don't talk to her.
Right.
Or oh, she was with so and so, and makes her a bitch or whatever. And you kind of vilify us as women, we vilify each other over these things. And like half the time, like half of it's not true. And if it is true, like that's her own agency. I don't know why we're making her a villain that way.
Right.
And it's also, on the other hand, if she is a victim of like an assault or anything like that, you're still vilifying her.
Exactly.
I was like, and there's no reason for that. It's not her fault, you know? And so for me, Medusa, the way her story has evolved over the years is something that brings not joy, but it's one of those that I'm like, I can see, her story evolve into something that lets, sexual assault survivors, find comfort in that, she was given, this gift where like no man, could hurt her again. And that is something I know that survivors really want to know, that they're safe again, that what happened already isn't going to happen again, you know. And I know her image is now being used for like tattoos, for, as a symbol of protection, and they found a lot of like her artifacts used as like symbols of protection and things like that. So I think she is slowly becoming just um like an icon or something for people to grab onto, to be like, this horrible thing also happened to her, but she's, moving forward. She may have been vilified by everybody, but maybe she's just a little misunderstood with her story. And I definitely align with that over, many years, you know. So that's who she is for me. And I know some people who are real lore specific are like, there's no evidence for that. And I'm like,
Oh, whatever.
mind your business. Mind your business.
Literally. I think that's a beautiful explanation of who this person is, of who Medusa
Yes.
is, but also of the many ways the story gets transmitted. And you kind of sparked something in my mind, and it's interesting. So, like Kathy, obviously, we both really love
Mm-hmm.
storytelling in any way that we can, and I think it's interesting how stories in the wrong hands can absolutely, as you mentioned, vilify individuals
Oh yeah.
for centuries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you can take it in the literal sense of people painting Medusa as the villain.
Yeah.
And that being taught to young girls at a very young
Mm-hmm.
age, and XYZ,
Mm-hmm.
but also the stories within the story of
Yeah, like the underlying tone. And I mean, when you think about it, all of our stories in history have been told by men.
hmm,
So it's been taken, there's obviously men and women experience lives differently. Archaeologists have found like a blade on top of like a shelf or whatever, and they thought, oh, well, maybe it's an offering to like the god or whatever. But then when a mom looked at it, she was like, it's just so the kids won't get it.
yeah,
Like, it's not that deep. I don't know
yes,
why you're making all this stuff up. So I
absolutely,
think, the story may have been one thing once, and then, whoever wrote it down, which is always going to be men because they have that upper hand in history,
yeah.
and they warp it, they tell it, they put extra stuff in there to, make Poseidon look good, and then they, send it off, and that's the story that gets, passed down and passed down. And you never really know what someone's story is unless they're allowed to tell their story, and if someone can write it down for them.
hmm And you bring out a brilliant point of this idea of privilege in storytelling. Right, like clearly in this world, right, Medusa did not have any words.
Yeah.
Like Medusa, depending on your depiction of what she looks like, right,
Mm-hmm.
couldn't talk to anybody, like couldn't have a friend, like couldn't
Mm-hmm.
be, you know, she didn't have anybody
Yeah.
to turn to at all.
Mm-hmm.
And these stories keep getting transmitted and passed down and keep silencing her, like in so
Yeah.
many different ways. And I had never thought about it, Kathy. I know, as you mentioned, all of the beautiful interpretations of people utilizing her as this beacon of hope and strength, specifically for sexual assault survivors.
Mm-hmm.
um, but I had never thought that this curse of
Yeah.
turning men to stone could have been a safety, could have been
A
a
gift.
superpower, a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful, beautiful way of looking at it. And I think there's so much power in that autonomy of like,
Yeah.
yes, I get to choose who I don't want to see and who I don't want to talk to and how
Yeah.
I want to live my life, and I will always be safe, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something to help, protect her from afar and not let anybody. And then, on the other side, like, there's also like a sadness to that, but I know that that speaks to a lot of people who are like, after they've been hurt, they're kind of like, I don't want to be around anybody. I don't want to be touched anymore. I don't want to be looked at anymore. And so while it's kind of a lonely concept, I know it's something a lot of, survivors can feel a lot of the times. It's kind of lonely. You feel like you're by yourself, even though the statistic is like 1 in 4,
Mm.
women will experience that before the age of like 21. So it's an isolating feeling in a huge group of people. So that's why she's so like fascinating to me,
Yeah.
the story and how it's been told and how new interpretations
Yeah.
are using her story to better relate to like modern times.
Yeah, and I like your specific interpretations. I'm
Huh.
very fascinated by what you're saying, and the isolation, as you mentioned, of
Hmm.
it's a survival tactic, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to, like any hurt animal, it's like I'm trying to understand what has happened, and
Hmm.
I'm trying to take into account that people will not believe me, will not
Yeah.
understand the story, will believe that person, will see me as the monster.
Yeah.
And sometimes staying away and is in a sense
Yeah. Like a
turning people
comfort
to
almost.
stone.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's quiet, and at the
Yeah.
very least it being quiet means that nothing's happening and I can't get
Yeah.
hurt, you know.
Yeah. And so for a lot of people, I know she's super important. And that idea of like isolating, like I know um a lot of people sometimes kind of retreat into themselves, myself included, and you really just you don't want to talk about it. You kind of want it to just like fall, to the back of your mind and like never think about it again. And so that's how I think Medusa really provides comfort of like, what, to some, like I said, some people may think she's also a monster, but
Sure. Yeah.
she definitely has like I there's a story there that no one's bothered to look at, which makes her fascinating for me.
And worthy of exploring, and
Yeah.
of these reinterpretations, and of people finding her as beautiful, and I think uh, so many things, so many things you're mentioning, so many things, and my brain's going like this.
Sorry.
No, it's perfect, it's amazing.
I was like, my mind likes to do that too.
I love it, I love it. Okay, here, let's see. I'll start chronologically.
Mhm.
For people that maybe for some reason, maybe they're like, I've never heard of Medusa ever before in my
Yeah.
life.
What, in your mind, what did Medusa look like?
So in my mind, I guess at first I've always thought of her as like the face of a woman who is like gorgeous, but maybe she's got like some scales or some scarring. And for me, her hair has always been like these long, locks of snakes that are constantly coiling in and coiling out. Um, almost like braids coming down and stuff like that. So that's what she's always looked like to me, and maybe like the body of a snake, right?
Yeah.
But I know some people, or I guess a new version that I've seen, or the newer versions.
Yeah.
And like Percy Jackson, she looks like she's got like these braids, like these snakes are just tucked up into like a nice little bouffant. She's got a hat that covers her eyes. And she's very much, human in more senses. She's soft spoken, explaining her story. And those interpretations I find even more appealing than what I originally thought she would look like.
This kind of, I don't know, I've always been against this idea that quiet or soft spoken means weak or means not strong, not in charge. Like, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Complete and utter bullshit. There is so much power in silence and in
Mm-hmm.
taking the time to choose your words and to speak
Yeah.
kindly to people and to speak softly to people. Like, there
Mm-hmm.
is such power in that. And I love
Yeah.
that idea.
Mm-hmm.
She's not necessarily just screaming at the top of her lungs. She could very well.
Yeah.
If she could do that if she wanted to.
I
Um,
know.
you know.
But I think there's a like intensity to it,
Mm-hmm.
instead of, being loud and out there and everywhere and stuff like that. Like it's taking all of that energy and honing it in and like focusing in like a softer, more direct way.
Yeah, more direct. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I love this idea too. I also, I'm so fascinated by this concept of her body being like 75% snakes.
Snake. Yeah. I don't
Why
know
do you?
why in my mind that's just
Yeah,
what I imagined she'd look like, almost like a
yeah,
mermaid but with a snake.
yeah. A snake tail. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
me too. I also think about her that way. Why do you think the snake was used in this story? Do you ever think
I
about
don't
that?
know. Maybe it's just, I mean, you can go back to like biblical, how like the snake in the tree and stuff like that, which would predate Medusa,
Mm-hmm.
or no, it would be after Medusa.
Right, right.
But I think just humanity understands that snakes are potentially really dangerous.
Mm.
Someone walks up to them, and depending where you live, because obviously there's like a million different kinds of snakes,
Yeah,
but you get bitten by them, and people can die from them. They're deadly. It hurts.
yeah,
You
yeah.
could break out in hives, and
Mm.
depending on what venom or what poison they have, you could be paralyzed. And so I think they just associated something that was like really scary and you shouldn't go near, and if you approach it you should like take
Yeah.
take it. I'm gonna take it back.
Yeah.
um And I guess because of that, so when they began telling the story and creating Medusa and stuff like that, you can only imagine like one snake is super dangerous. Imagine a head full.
Mhm.
Sorry.
You're fine. Yeah.
So I guess just when creating like a monster where you shouldn't go near, she's super deadly, super dangerous, they pick like they picked something that they knew was super dangerous, and they put it all over her head, and they made her body that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she takes on kind of like a lizard perception, like she herself is a snake.
Cold-blooded.
Cold-blooded,
Yeah.
you know killer basically. So I guess in some ways maybe that's what the ancient Greeks were trying to come up with, like she's really just one bad mama jamma, don't
Yeah.
go near her.
Don't do it.
Don't.
Don't do
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And I think it's cool because you're absolutely right. Like, dependent, everybody has different snakes. But
Oh,
like Kathy and I are from the Southwest, and
Oh,
we're very we know a lot about poisonous snakes because we grew up with it at school. And like
Jesus.
it's you could see a
Yeah.
rattlesnake just walking a few miles
They're like, if you
outside.
start hearing something playing maracas, you need to
Skedaddle.
you need to skedaddle.
You
I
need
don't
to
know where you're
maraca your
going.
way out
You need
there.
to go. Yeah, between like little snakes that you find like in backyards and stuff like that, but they're always like, no, like
Yeah.
granted you might not die, but you are gonna have a sucky time.
Yeah. It could be very bad. And
Yeah,
I think you make a great point that I'm not a snake expert, but like
I know.
9 times out of 10, there are warning signs that a snake is near. Um,
Beware, yeah.
there's right, like there's a lot of different ways, even it just existing. Like they have like sayings about that stuff. Like it's like
Hmm.
with their stripes, like what red and
Oh,
yellow mean
I
together,
think
right? Like
it's
something
like red and yellow, you're an okay fellow. Black and red, you're
you're
dead.
dead or something.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was like, someone feel free to correct that.
right. We're probably dead, Kathy. We did it
I know.
completely wrong. It's like that's
It's
not
all
it.
backwards.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. They warn. And like I think that actually kind of doubles this idea of not having consent for this person,
mm-hmm.
because I am positive that I mean, and you're right, there's different retellings of this story. It could have been consensual. With Poseidon,
Mm-hmm.
it could have not been. But I
Yeah.
think either way, there in some form or fashion, consent was not had. Whether that was with Poseidon and Medusa, whether that was with Athena and Medusa in some way of
Yeah.
like her
It's
story.
yeah, when you think about it, the gods, the main three, right? Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus are not known for being good dudes. Like across the board, they're not really known for it.
No,
And so it's one of those where I'm like, I don't know. Poseidon doesn't seem like the kind of dude to be like, hey, you
no,
know? He kind of just seems like one of those that's like, now, please,
yeah, yeah,
you know?
yeah, yeah,
And for, followers of Athena, they know that she's like a stout, virgin. Like that's her thing. That's what she asks of her followers and stuff like that. Why, you know, even if it is Poseidon, why would she break that vow?
right,
You know? So there's, depending on who you ask, I guess you'll get a different story. And for me, I've seen that kind of situation of, a powerful man and, just a woman who's trying to mind her business. I've seen that interaction over and over and over again, and never is it, you know, they were in love, so she decided to leave. Most of the time, it's, he wanted to, and she was kind of like, I guess, or
yeah,
she was scared to say no, scared to,
mhm,
step on like a god's toes, this powerful man's toes.
yeah,
And that's just kind of, I think, how it, played out. So me in my, modern times, I see this story and I don't see that she betrayed Athena. I see, you know, that, Poseidon hurt Medusa.
yeah,
And that's mostly just because that's the dynamic I've seen a majority of the time, in life.
right,
Um, and there's even, some nuance to how Athena treated Medusa. Was it a gift so that no man would ever attack her again? Or was it a punishment? And is that a commentary or metaphor for how we turn on each other as women? You know,
yeah,
especially, in this day and age. And I think it's gotten a lot better,
sure,
but, you'll never, not hear like, oh, did you hear? Like, oh, you know? So I think
hmm,
within that story, in my experience and projecting, what I've seen and how, I've lived life, that's what that story kind of, looks like to me,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know? So I forgot what the original question was.
Nope,
Dear.
nope, nope. You,
I was like,
no, we were bouncing back and forth
I know.
about
I was
this
like,
idea of consent and like this idea of
yeah.
who makes up the story. You're absolutely right. And
Mhm.
it, I don't know. Rumors, and false interpretations of stories and taking other people's stories and using
Mhm.
it to your own advantage
Yeah.
is so fucking destructive.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just it's literally it can ruin a person's life.
It. Yeah. It
Um,
turns into. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, but I'll never forget the experience. I was in high school and I was in English class, whatever, and we're sitting there quietly, doing whatever we do. And across, the seat from me, this guy is talking about how he was sleeping with a girl that I knew, right? And he was making like commentary about it and he was telling, his friend, whatever. And just as I sat there, part of me was just like, that I'm almost certain she didn't say you could just be telling
mm-mm,
everybody.
mm-mm.
Because at the time, I think I was like a freshman. So you're talking about like a 15-year-old
Yeah,
and like another 15-year-old, but still it's just one of those, it's like she was like being really vulnerable with you and you're out here just telling, your buddy whatever.
everybody. Yeah,
And he wasn't quiet. Like I could hear him when I was across the room and I could start to see, the girls next to him start to make faces. And I was just like, damn, like I already know that
yeah,
that's gonna suck for her. And so now as an adult, I mean, what can you do when you're a kid? You don't know what to do in that situation.
not at all.
But as an adult, it's kind of like, man, that's rough.
Oh, yes.
And I'm like, because even as a kid, you don't know, so you almost like join in, or like
Oh,
your
sure.
silence is also,
Yes. Yeah.
it's permitting this thing to happen. And I was like, man, I should have said something to her, or I should have. But you can't change the past. But now, I take those lessons with me as an adult, and I'm always like, no, like if something's going down, you should say something.
Yeah.
You should say something, do something, be like, hey, you know,
Yeah.
cut it out, don't say nothing. So, and that's kind of how I literally watched, someone's story, and how I'm sure how she told it to her friends is completely different than the male side that I was hearing. And so when you talk about like Medusa and stories and stuff like that, like it really just depends on who's telling it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure on her side it was like, oh, he came over, he was so sweet, and
Yeah.
da da da, and he's over here just talking smack,
Yeah.
you know?
To be cool or whatever.
Yeah. So every time I hear, stories, I wonder who's telling the story.
Yeah.
I gotta always keep in mind like this is super fascinating. Oh my god! But like, who's telling me
Mm-hmm.
the story? Because that will ultimately depend. It'll change the way the story can be interpreted. Like you never know. There's always another side to those stories.
Always.
Mhm.
Always. That is so true. And number one, personally, I don't think you should beat yourself up about not saying anything then, because as you said, we were kids and we didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things like I think, and you can totally agree with me on this or not, but like I don't know what this was cross culturally or universally for other people, but growing up
Mhm.
in Mexican American households, like not only was sexuality seen as a very don't do it, like
Oh
don't
god.
be a sexual
Yeah.
being,
It was like a sin.
so yes, sinful,
Yeah.
especially for female identifying chicanas or Latinas, right? Like
Yeah.
we were not supposed to
Mhm.
be any form of sexual
Exactly.
at all. So
Everything was so taboo.
so taboo.
Um,
So taboo.
like from feminine care to like dating, like it was so hush hush.
Everything.
Your parents didn't talk to you about it. You basically got your information from friends.
Yeah, yeah, whatever you could
And
find. Yeah.
yeah, friends, when we were getting up internet,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Exactly.
it was almost like it set you up to fail, you know? Like
Yes.
if you were, not doing anything with anybody, you were approved, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And then they're like, no, no, no. But like, God forbid you do something like, well, she's easy.
Very easy. Can get with any man she wants or he wants or
Exactly.
whatever.
And then it just kind of turned, and it, because I think for, Hispanics, it's such a narrow, aisle for you to be in to exist. Like any one step out immediately. Like I know I've been called everything under, the sun back in the day. And
Fuck
the
those
stupidest
people.
part, I know, but like the stupidest part is like none of what was being said was true.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
just didn't bother to like clear up misconceptions or whatever. It was just perception. But because that aisle of, existing
Yeah.
Hispanic culture is so narrow that the moment you kind of like drift off or you tilt over, you know,
Yeah.
they'll come at you.
Yeah. And it's like a joy to have your name in other people's mouths for these people. I
Yes.
don't know why. I don't know where
Yeah.
it comes from. I don't know
It's
what.
chismosa culture.
Yes, it is
It's
chismosa culture, and people don't realize like just because the men are the most chismoso, like they are the ones that perpetuate this idea.
they
You know,
hear and they don't even hear the right thing. They just kind of hear what they want to hear.
they hear
You
what they
know,
want to hear, say what
they
they want
heard
to say.
they
Mm-hmm.
heard two words and they just ran off with it.
Mm-hmm. Going to go tell their little friends.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah, exactly. And it's so destructive. And you make such good points about you exist on this very thin wire, like
Hmm.
growing up. And we still feel it as
Oh
young
yeah.
adults trying to figure out who we are as people. And you're in high school, which is literally like a fucking jungle. Like
Hmm.
nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. They're all confused and figure themselves out. What's sex? Like what is being romantic? Like what is
Like
partnership?
what am I doing?
No idea. We're and that's going to be anywhere, right? Like teens are hormonal. Like that's just
Yeah,
point blank
that's just
period.
how they exist.
And then you get this idea in society and culture perpetuating these views that you shouldn't do it, like just don't think about it,
Yeah.
don't do it, which
Hmm.
creates again this silence and shame around these conversations. So
Yeah.
not only are the good parts of having a romantic partner, like, oh, I wish I could tell my dad that I have
Yeah.
this crush on this person,
Hmm.
it turns into if something bad happens
Hmm.
sexually, you
Yeah.
extra can't even tell a soul.
Anybody. Yeah.
It just pushes you further and further and further down into, as you said, this silence and this isolation. And it makes me so mad that you just had to be quiet and just stay quiet and just be like, whatever, my name's in their mouth, it doesn't matter. Like they can say whatever
Yeah.
because it does hurt. Like I know you're like the strongest person I know, and I I still think it's fucked up. Like it doesn't like it's not okay.
Yeah. It makes you like a prickly person.
Mm.
So now, being married and trusting in Luis and, being so far separated from, time has just given me a window to be like, whew, I can breathe and, solve these things and go through it or whatever. But, when you're going through it and you can't say anything and you can't express yourself and you can't, tell anybody because of the shame and stuff like that, it kind of just adds like these little thorns on you,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in between people talking about, oh, well, she's a slut or whatever, then, the word that was always passed around was like, man, she's a bitch, man. She's like, blah, blah, blah. And it's just because, you have that anger and that sadness and it has nowhere to go.
No.
So it
No.
just kind of turns you a little prickly on the outside.
Just
Super soft
cold.
on the inside, but a little prickly.
Yeah. Rightfully so. You're in survival mode
Yeah. Yeah.
like the whole time.
Yeah. So it's definitely um how stories can create worlds, they can also very much destroy people's worlds.
Yeah.
And so
Just
in
like
that isolation and stuff, I think that's where a lot of people have found comfort in stories where that she's by herself, and that's peaceful to some people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's peace in that strength and peace in
Yeah.
going forward despite
Mhm.
everything that's happened to you, you know.
Yeah.
And you remind me too in a lot of different interpretations of Medusa.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember the specifics, but like I know that she was also seen as like whoever kills her is also seen as powerful, right? Like this
Yeah, that you're taking,
that
like,
power,
yeah.
right? And it's like
Well, so if I'm not mistaken, I think she can't die, but when you cut off her head,
mhm,
like, you are basically allowed to use her as a weapon, even though she no longer has,
mhm, mhm.
her head on her.
Yep.
And I want to say it was like Hercules,
Gosh.
Perseus.
Perseus. Yes. Yeah.
Perseus.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I know. I was
Yes.
like, it took me when I was like, who is it?
One of those
One of those.
assholes.
Yeah, and they've even made, there's like a statue where she's basically on the floor and he's like holding her by
Holding
the head
her.
and
Yeah.
to chop off her head and stuff. And it's one of those. It's like even her death is dictated by the men who killed her,
Mhm,
basically. So
mhm.
even in death, her story is still dictated by the men who choose to tell the story, and
Yeah.
how it made him a hero
Mhm.
and she was a villain.
Yep. She had no peace. No peace.
Nope. And
Which
that,
it
I think, it's just kind of how women live most
mm,
of their lives. Some of them, they settle down and they get, but they're never allowed peace, right? Because even, as you pass, oh, you're married, are you going to have kids? Do you not want kids? Why don't
why?
you want kids? Yeah, why don't you want kids? Why aren't you getting married?
Right.
If you do have kids, oh, well, you're not doing it right. Oh, are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? Are you going to stay at home? Oh,
Mhm.
wow. So you're not going to help
Weird.
your husband? Oh, you're going to go to work? Oh, you should be spending time with your kids. Like, there's no
Mhm.
peace for a woman through her whole life.
Mm-mm.
They want you to stay young, but, like, be crazy, but
Mhm.
be in line. Be
Yeah.
this and be that.
Yeah.
And so there's never really any peace
No.
as a woman in today's world. They want, you can't do anything right. Ain't nobody
No.
happy.
No, ever, including yourself because of said things.
Yeah. It's always people who don't got skin in the game that have the most to say.
Always. Are you kidding?
I know.
All the time. All that's our entire existence.
I know.
Is that exactly? I don't know. I don't know. It's so frustrating. And like, I granted, haven't been in school in a while, but like, I really hope that there are teachers out there. I really do. And I
That are a
know
little more vigilant.
yes, yes, that are teaching kids about these stories and about the different versions of these stories.
Yeah.
Just because again, another reason that I love monsters so deeply is because we learn about ourselves through them and we learn about who we can be and who the bad people are and how to overcome these fears and these
Yeah.
monstrous villains in our lives, and
Hmm.
storytelling can be such a beautiful vessel for that too, of like teaching kids, hey, look at this story, but look at how strong this individual is and
Yeah.
what they can do and how powerful they are, right? Like these little interpretations can change a child's like complete
Yeah.
outlook on
On what?
life,
Yeah.
you know
It can provide. So not every story is for. It doesn't always have to be for everyone.
no.
And for like a little kid, who's struggling, some stories, and if they happen to relate to the monster, to show that, like, not every monster is black and white.
Hmm.
It's not, you know, immediately default bad guy. There's some shades of gray in there. So
Yeah.
they don't feel shame about relating to this monster because of their life that they've, experienced.
Right.
It gives them a chance to empathize, and create a new story for themselves, where they get, a happy ending,
For once, finally.
Yes.
Finally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Well, obviously, I know that you are so well versed in this and you've thought about this for a long time. But why does Medusa mean so much to you? Right? Like why has she stuck out for you at this day and age in your life?
I think the reason I, gravitate towards her is because at different points in my life, I've also been, the victim of abuse and things like that. And so seeing her, and she's, an icon, everybody knows her name and stuff like that. And for a long time, for me, being alone was like the protective coating, right? I don't need you in my life. You can go, real cold, real heartless. And for me, back then when I saw, Medusa and her ability like to turn men to stone, that for me was like a strength. And when you're young, you try looking for examples of strength to like hold on to, right? Without, and she was definitely one that she obviously didn't have a romantic love interest, she, and like I said, when I had heard her story, I knew what it sounded like. So for me, it was just, there's another side of it. There's, living your life. And if everybody thinks you're a monster, then they do. But, you're safe and you're strong enough to defend yourself. And that for me is what made me gravitate towards her story and, start thinking about like, well, I don't think that's her whole story. I think, or even if it is, that's her whole story, I'm going to interpret it and I'm going to take her story, because stories are allowed to change depending on who's telling it.
Yeah.
And the story that I want to tell about her has her being, strong and defending herself, even though she isn't, even though she doesn't need a man,
Yeah.
and she perseveres and continues to, just move and live and continue moving, because sometimes, you really just kind of want the world to stop.
Of course.
And because things move so fast, for it's just seeing an example of someone go through it and then keep going. That there's always a keep going.
That's beautiful. That's really well said. Yeah, absolutely. It that visibility and that I don't know, that just ability to see that happening, to see somebody get up and walk away, and walk on and continue, is so powerful.
And to see, her story change, because everybody for a long time was like, she's a monster and a villain. And I just can relate to, being called, a bitch, a monster, and when you feel that way, and now that her story is getting a chance to breathe new life and being, an advocate for, survivors of sexual abuse. And that's, where I want my story and where I want my things to continue to be, a defender, an advocate, the person you can tell and who'll believe you and who'll be, a pillar that you can lean on, so that you're not so lonely and you don't have to, go through it, because I've known what it feels like to go through that.
I love you so much.
Oh,
So
I
much, and I'm
too.
giving you a hug in my mind. I hope you know that right here.
Right.
Well, I think this kind of answers this question too, but Do you think Medusa is scary?
No, she's not scary. I mean, maybe to men she's scary, but
rightfully so.
To me, I was like, to me, she's not scary, and I don't think I've ever been scared of her.
Yeah.
In any, in any capacity. I think she is misunderstood. Yeah. On the outside, it's probably a lot of ugly, but on the inside, it's hurt and it's pain. Yeah. And that's something I can relate to. And so for me, even as like a little kid, she never seemed scary.
Yeah.
You can feel an ooey gooey center in people.
That's so cute. Yeah, and she has it. Yeah. Well, do you think Medusa is a monster?
No. Yeah. I know technically by definitions she is a monster, but with the monsters that I've seen, in real world and in stories and stuff like that, she isn't a monster to me. Because I know that there is, much more ugly out there than anything than she's capable of doing, right?
Yeah. She is the epitome of what it's like to not be a monster. Yeah. In other words,
she's just she's gone through it, and everybody calls her one, but I don't think there's ugly on the inside.
Yeah.
Of my Medusa.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, why do you think that in general monsters, or the idea of monsters, stories surrounding monsters, should be talked about? And I know you said, right, Medusa may not be a monster for you, and that's beautiful, but why do you think these conversations should happen?
I think monsters serve their purpose in storytelling to give us something to fear, because in a lot of ways there are monsters out there, to be scared of what's unknown and stuff like that, to and they get passed down as way to warn other generations, because that's it's the art of storytelling. You try and put a theme in there that you can pass down that'll mean something to generations beneath you.
Right.
So whether that be being scared of spiders or snakes, that they're super dangerous, so beware.
Yeah.
Red, yellow, whatever
the fellow guy is.
Whatever that is.
Whatever's going on.
Fellow that snake is. They serve their purpose, but it's it's up to people, or I guess it's it's the liberty and the freedom of being able to take that monster and also kind of turn it around and present it back, or know that not everything is black and gray, hero and villains. That a hero has the capacity to be a villain, and a villain has a capacity to be a hero. A really favorite quote of mine is every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. So just however people choose to see these characters, but monsters serve their purpose. It just depends on who's calling them a monster.
Not only is the character itself so imperative or important, but so is the author sometimes, and so is the distributor. Right? What movie theater is it playing? Right? That.
Hold on, where am I?
It's important. It's really important.
It is. You gotta. It's the author is just as important as the characters are.
Well, last question, Kathy. Okay. Very last question. It's kind of silly.
We didn't get too far away.
Oh God, no! You did amazing. I have so many thoughts in my mind, and my mind's running in such a good way. But say you're just chilling, right, with your babies, your dog babies in El Paso. You're chilling. You're with Luis, maybe having dinner. I don't know. And all of a sudden there's a knock on the door, and you open the door, and Medusa's there. What would you do or say?
I'd probably have to tell Luis to go. I'm not trying.
Bye.
You're gonna want to step out for a moment.
Go
but
take the dogs.
I would probably, ask questions about maybe like what actually went down. I'd probably thank her for, being kind of like this guiding, comfort, for helping me rebuild and put things back. When you're, piecing yourself back together, helping me, realize that even though, you're a victim, when you build yourself up, you can still be strong afterwards. And probably just to thank her, and hopefully that she knows that she is a symbol for a lot of survivors, and that her story didn't just end with, its original telling. That her story has evolved into something more meaningful.
Forever.
Yeah, forever.
That
yeah.
is
From this point forward.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's in stone now is that strength and power she admits. That's beautiful. And then you can cook for her, and then you'll be best friends, and then
we'll keep Luis in the closet for a little while.
Luis, don't look at her. Okay, I'm not doing this. Just hang out in there.
Put some shades on real quick, Medusa. Do me a favor.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about him.
I'm gonna have all my dogs outside. Be like, I don't know if it transfers into animals too.
Right. But just chill out there.
I was like, y'all just go home. And I'll be back.
God, I really hope, Kathy, that you get a Medusa tattoo, because that would look so sick. That would look so cool.
I would like one. I would definitely like one.
Good idea.
An idea.
Yeah.
See me the next time. Just
full back tat. Heck yeah. Heck
yeah.
Are you kidding? That'd be so cool.
That's the idea.
I love it.
Aww.
This episode of Floaties for Krakens was written and recorded by me, Camille Maria Costa. A monstrous thank you to Kathy Fuentes for such a beautiful interview. A big thank you to Michael Kosman for producing a stellar episode. And a huge thank you to Natalie Hedberg for designing such a phenomenal logo. And music for the show is also written and produced by me, with a special appearance by my tata, Toby Acosta. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's show. It truly means the world to me. If you have questions or curiosities about the research or media referenced in this episode, everything will hopefully be in the description box. And you can find us on our website and our socials. Links in the description as well. Anyway, thanks again for being here, everyone. And just a reminder, it's okay to be afraid of the monster, but it's also okay to love the heck out of it too. Keep being monstrous, and keep shining bright.